You are listening to the Batflip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Batflip Podcast. My name is Damian here with my co-host Matt, coming to you on August 10th of 2021. We're gonna bring back the division breakdown this week, hit on some potential key matchups, and then instead of Players of the Week, we're gonna, since we haven't done it in a while, we're gonna go to Players of the Month. But before we jump into all that, how you doing, Matt?
Doing pretty good. Had a good weekend. I actually went down to the Gulf Coast, the Dauphin Island, Alabama, over the past Wednesday through Saturday. Did a little fishing and a little riding out in the boat. It was a lot of fun. I got a lot of sun. A few fishing injuries. Got stuck by a catfish pretty good, so that wasn't fun. Caught a bunch of sharks, some king mackerel. It was a good time. So I always enjoy going down there. But
That's awesome.
yeah, back home and working this week, and it's watching some baseball. Man, we're getting down to the nitty gritty time here. So it's been a lot of fun the last couple days.
Yeah, we're just under, I think, 50 games left in the season, pretty much. So it's
or a full season last year. So
yeah, pretty much however Rob Manfred wants it.
yeah.
But yeah, speaking of that, before we jump into all of else, what's up? I mean, I know I sent it to you, but he wants to expand the playoffs to 14 teams now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it. I guess it's better
No.
than the 16 from last year, but I mean, there has to be incentive for the good teams to be really good. And
Right.
I don't like how they had it last year. I got it for last year because of the shortened season. But I don't like because I mean, last year the Reds were obviously a playoff team that got off to a slow start. And in a 60-game season, you can't get off to a slow start. But they would have been there at the end in a 162-game season. It's just one of those things. Like, you know, you look at um, these teams as like this year. I don't know who the seventh team would be this year, but in the NL, I guess it would probably be the Reds. And I mean, the Reds are pretty good, but
I think it'll probably be the Padres.
it'd be the Padres.
Because what I was thinking is they'd probably do top two from each division, and then the best record after
Yeah.
that.
Well, I mean, then the Braves or the Phillies, whoever. I mean, the NL East doesn't deserve two teams. So
Right.
you've got the Braves, the Phillies, whoever ends up second in that division, or the Mets. One of the three is going to end up second in that division. They would be getting in and probably won't have more than 83, 84, 85 wins. So
Right.
over teams that, and then they'll have an equal shot under the last year's rules. At least they would have had an equal shot to, like the Dodgers and the Giants and these teams that have won tons of games this year. So I definitely think, I definitely look at this as a situation where it's like, I don't know. I don't especially love the way that, that would be structured. I think the 12 teams is good because it's not easy to win. It's not easy to make the playoffs, but it's, you get enough teams in there where there's enough teams going for it. You saw this year where you had like the Cardinals buying at the deadline. They didn't buy too much, but they bought a little bit, knowing that they were around 500. You had the Braves, and I believe the Phillies were still below 500 at the deadline. Both of those teams buying at a 500 or below record. So, it's a situation where you've got enough teams in it to where a lot of teams are, believe in, believe in it. But you also have a lot of teams that, it's not just easy to make the playoffs. If you end up with half or more teams making the playoffs, it's just there's no reason to play the regular season at that point. Like, the teams that are rebuilding are not going to make it, and then the teams that have, that are average are going to make it. So it's like, I don't think that's cool. But I think the current setup is really good. There's incentive to win your division, but if you end up with a team that's, like one of the NL West teams this year, probably going to have 97 or 98 wins and not win their division, they still get in because they're one of the top teams. But they also, since they didn't win the division, are going to end up having to face off with with another wild card team. That's a good playoff team. So I think the way they have it right now is the right way to do it.
Yeah, I don't understand what their whole method of what they want to go for is. It's just, I mean, we'll have to know what the more format of it is. That was just kind of a bold, bland statement out there that he wants to make 14, but definitely we'll have to see if that comes true, what it actually looks like the format wise.
Yeah. So
But
it's definitely something. And I mean, 10 teams. I think, like I say, 10 teams is perfect.
yeah, I think 10. I mean I like the way it happens now. If only thing I could change, I wish the wild card series was probably like an actual like 3 game series and not just a winner take all type
Yeah,
game.
I do agree with that because right now you've got a situation where, like, say a team like the Mets, and the Mets I don't think are going to win the wild card because I think their really only shot is winning the division at making the playoffs.
Right.
But say they made the wild card and they'd have DeGrom pitching. Like, the Mets aren't a very good team, but they could possibly knock out the Giants or the Dodgers or the Padres, whoever's
Mm-hmm.
in it, with just because they have their one really good pitcher throwing. And
Right.
I mean, it's one of those deals where I think you need to at least be able to at least have to have a little bit of depth to win that wild card series. But um, that's part of the punishment for not winning your division. I mean, like I
Yeah.
say, that's the NL West is going to be really exciting the rest of the year because these teams, we know that they're going to want to try to win that division. So you could end up having a team like the Dodgers, winning 96, 97, 98 games with the roster that they have, and they could end up not winning the division and being one and out in the postseason with a
Oh.
having to go against like the Padres, who would be throwing like maybe you Darvish or Joe Musgrove or somebody really good. So, that's just the situation that, if you're a team, you have to go after that division win, because, you don't want to end up getting stuck in that wild card game or that one game anything can happen. We've seen it so many times. One of the bigger upsets I can remember was back in maybe 2015 when the Astros beat that Yankees team in the wild card game, and behind Dallas Keuchel, and you saw that, it was one of those things where it was everyone kind of expected the Yankees to win, but the Astros had their guy on that one night and were able to do it, go on and play in the next series. So it's definitely an interesting idea, but I'd like to keep it at 10, or if you did if you expanded to added 2 teams to the Major League Baseball, made it 32 teams, then I would be okay with going to 12 teams. If you add a couple of expansion teams, but at the current current stage where we're at, I think 10 teams is perfect.
Yeah, 10 teams for this stage is just fine with me. But let's jump into the breakdown that we're going to go to. Let's start in the AL East. Last time we did a breakdown and we kind of talked to you guys, Boston was really leading this division and kind of pulling away with it a little bit. And now it's kind of flip flopping. Tampa Bay's leading this division by 4 games over Boston.
Yeah, so this is an interesting division, and this is another situation like I was just talking about, where you really want to win this division because, for one thing, it's no guarantee that the second place team in this division is going to make the playoffs, because you do have the A's sitting there with a 64-48 record right now. So they would currently be the number 2 wild card. So that there's going to be a battle for that wild card spot, that second wild card spot for sure there. But I mean, the Rays are just kind of being the Rays. They're winning games. They're playing fantastic defense. They're pitching well, doing kind of the same things that they've done for the last couple of years that took them to the World Series last year. They're a very, very solid team. There's not too many things we could say about them. They're gonna keep improving too, because they've got a couple of really young guys, and the big one being Wander Franco, who, I mean, he's just gonna keep adjusting to the big leagues and just keep getting better.
Yeah, and it's really weird. Like, I know we talked about it last week, but like they're a team that kind of like bought but then sold at the same time. Like they traded away Rich Hill, they traded away Diego Castillo, but then you bring in Nelson Cruz, and I think they brought in one more. Or am I wrong?
Yeah, they did. I'm trying to remember who it was, but it was a reliever. They brought in another reliever, and um,
Well,
you know
yeah, and
that.
then they had traded Willie Damas earlier in the year,
Yep,
even.
and they got 2 of their kind of top relievers at the current moment, for Willie Adames, who, you know, Willie Adames has been really good for the Brewers, but he was kind of blocking Water Franco,
Right.
and the Rays wanted Water Franco to come up, and Taylor Walls, and they also have Brujan that's been up some. Like, this is a team that with that youth is just going to get better. And they've got great pieces, guys with fantastic stuff on the mound. Um, This is a team that I think there was a little bit of disappointment at the deadline because I think they did try to go out and get a Chris Bryant, or one of those big rentals at the deadline. But I think that they're content where they're at. And I mean, this is a team, the defending American League champion, right here. And they're leading the division. And a lot of people kind of wrote them off for the season after losing Charlie Morton and losing some of their couple of their bats. And then you get midway through the season, teams writing them off because the Red Sox are up there, and the Blue Jays made all these moves in the offseason, and the Yankees are buying and they're coming back. The Rays have just steadily been the best team in this division all year. And no offense to the Red Sox because they've been good too, um, but I do like the Red Sox in second. They're about to get Chris Sale back. It sounds like at what level we don't know, but it sounds like he is going to come back soon. So that's very good news for the Red Sox.
Yeah, and one the other thing on Tampa Bay, they're also doing this without Tyler Glass now. I mean, I think we forget that a little bit. That
Yep,
I mean, he was pitching at an ace type level, and they're doing this well still without him,
absolutely.
and he actually underwent or is going to undergo Tommy John, so he's going to
Yeah,
miss the rest of the season and the
most of the
whole.
next year. Yeah,
I think they even said miss all of
yeah.
2022 most likely.
Yeah, I think his
Um,
timetable, on a typical Tommy John, he would possibly come back like in September next year, maybe as a
yeah,
reliever type thing, but unlikely, just depending on where the Rays are at.
especially
Tommy
with
John's
his
such a
injury history.
yeah, and Tommy John's just such a, you know, it's just such a random injury for guys. Like some of them come back stronger than ever. Some of them come back just kind
A
of
shell of
losing
themselves.
shell of themselves, and some
Yeah,
of them come back really quick, no problems. Some of them, take an extra year. I mean, you just never know with Tommy John, and
you
that's
never
kind
do.
of the reason that they're with the riskiness of it. But anyways, in this division, also hot on the tail of the Rays and Red Sox, the Yankees have played extremely well since the trade deadline. They went out and got a couple of big time players, Joey Gallo being the big one. They also went out and got from the Cubs,
Anthony Rizzo.
Anthony Rizzo, who's played really really well. Uh, they've been 8-2 in their last 10 games, so they've picked up I believe 6 games on the Red Sox in their last 10 games, which is pretty impressive. And you look at the Blue Jays too. I mean, the Blue Jays aren't they're 7.5 out of the first place, but they've won 7 of their last 10. They're sitting there 9 games over 500, and they're a threat as well. And this is a team that it's felt all year like you've wondered how they're not better than they are because their starting pitching has been better than expected. Robbie Ray's been really good compared to expectations this year. You look at Hyunjin Ryu's been good. I mean, you've got some good pitchers there, and then that lineup is just nasty. So you wonder how they haven't been that great, and they're finally starting to put it together a little bit. Might be a little bit of sequencing, and then the poor
Well,
Orioles. Not that not that the Orioles are good, but I mean the fact that they're in this division just makes them. I
right.
mean, 38-72, man. I think I looked up and the Braves AAA team. They have a couple guys on rehab assignments tonight. And I think the Braves AAA team is better than the Orioles team tonight. So um, I mean, it's been one of those situations for the Orioles this year. Nothing's really gone right for them. The one thing that has gone right has been Cedric Mullins, and he's honestly been like a legitimate MVP candidate type player. Not that he's going to win it, mainly because he's on the Orioles, and there's a couple other really deserving players, but he's been so good, and it's fun to watch him. So
Yeah, so jumping back to pretty much through this whole division, since you ran down the names real quick. Um, Boston, I mean, they've been really good, but they're also, I mean, Kyle Schwarber, who they traded for at the deadline, had another setback from his hamstring injury with a groin injury. So they're looking at a little farther along from whenever he comes back. Um, and I guess the plan is for them to play him at first base. The Yankees, like you said, they've been hot on the tail of them, of the Red Sox, and pretty much this division lately. I think Rizzo got put on the COVID list, even
yes,
though
he did.
he's
I think he
fully
tested
vaccinated.
positive.
Yeah, I think he's fully vaccinated, so he should be able. I don't think he's going to miss the full two 2 weeks. I think it's only like 10 days if he can test negative or something.
I'm not 100% sure about
Um,
Rizzo because I think I remembered something about him making a big deal out of the vaccine, or I don't know. I don't remember,
I
but
don't remember that.
um,
Anyways,
Yeah, I know that he tested positive, so
Yeah, I know he tested positive. I just don't know what his timeline is exactly. But they're only 2 games out of the wild card now.
oh yeah.
So, like you said, that Oakland's sitting right there, second team in the wild card, but they got to look for the Yankees right on their tail. Um, Another thing with the Blue Jays run, you were saying a little bit of sequencing, and they've kind of turned it on lately. It's kind of synced up with when they got George Springer back. When he finally got into that lineup, it seems like it took another little step to that team, and they just got that little extra gear in them. They have had some people that aren't performing quite up to what they would expect or hope, but even their deadline or their acquisition of Brad Hand at the deadline hasn't been great for them so far. But this whole run's kind of lined up when George Springer actually came back off the IL for the final time so far.
Yeah, and you talk about George Springer, and he's a guy who this year a 286 average, 370 on base, 627 slugging in just 43 games. So this is a guy who's been an impact player this year, and for his career he's been so good. 2019 he was insane. Big part of Houston's championship run. And he plays good defense too in the outfield. So you definitely have to be excited as a Blue Jays fan to get George Springer back in your lineup, have him healthy, because he's just the type of player that is he's an impact player.
Well,
And
yeah, and
you add another impact player to Guerrero Jr., who is my MVP so far.
yep.
And you add it and to Bo Bichette and Teoscar Hernandez and all these guys, and you just gotta that lineup is just absolutely insane. Marcus Simeon. I mean,
I
they
mean,
just got pieces everywhere.
yeah, and you mentioned his season numbers, but even if you look at his last month numbers, they've been even more insane.
Oh
He's
yeah,
got a 337 average, a 1.11 or 1.149 OPS with 9 homers, 26 runs, and 22 RBIs in 96 at bats. Like,
yeah,
his season numbers look good, but then if you look at that last month, kind of when this run really started happening for the Blue Jays, and you could see that George Springer's been a big focal point of that. So I think the Blue Jays, they could be a sneaky team to sneak into that wild card because there are only 3.5 games back. They do have to jump a couple teams, like the Yankees and the A's, and they're going to be battling within that division. But I wouldn't. It wouldn't shock me if the Blue Jays kept up a little bit of a run and snuck their way into a wild card somehow.
yeah, no doubt. And according to Fangraphs, just looking at the AL East, they have that playoff odds that takes into account the projections of the teams the rest of the season, and strength with using strength of schedule as part of that. And the Blue Jays they have the second easiest strength of schedule in that division coming through the end of the season. The Yankees have the most difficult, and the Blue Jays playoff percentage is up. The chance to make the playoffs is up to over 40% now, where it had been pretty low, before recently. The Rays are at 85%, the Red Sox at 72%, the Yankees at 54%. So definitely interesting stuff. That's going to be a wild division to watch to the end, not only for the win of the division, which I think is not going to be a 4 game difference. I think it's going to be closer than that. But also, all four of those teams are potential wild card teams. So definitely an interesting finish to the season there in the AL East. But let's move on. We probably won't talk quite as long about the AL Central because I'm pretty sure, um,
You
although
mean,
Bob Nightingale might have jinxed them,
yeah,
I'm pretty sure we know who's going to win that division.
you mean the team with the 10.5 game lead in the division? We don't want to talk about that one as much.
Yeah, I think I think that division is already pretty well wrapped up. It's the
Yeah,
Chicago White Sox, man. I, they have done it in a different way than I expect them to do it this year. They've done it with just elite starting pitching, and the fact that Lucas Giolito has been their third best pitcher
yeah.
is, I mean, and Lucas Giolito has been pretty good. He hadn't been great this year, but I mean, you look at what Lance Lynn and Carlos Rodon have done. It's just absolutely insane, especially Rodon. This is a guy who was left for dead. So
Well, this was a guy that the White Sox almost didn't even re-sign this offseason.
non-tender.
And yeah, and nobody wanted him really yet in the market, and he kind of convinced the White Sox to give him one more chance. to prove that he had dealt with a lot of injury issues before, but just to prove that he could pitch in the major leagues. And then now look at him, and he's probably going to get a pretty sizable contract, and from it. And like you said, it's different than what we thought. We thought this was going to be a team that just went out there and kind of out hit everybody. They have missed Eloy Jimenez for most of the season,
And Luis
and then
Robert.
Luis Robert went out for most of the season. And then Grandal's not what they expected Grandal to be this year, and he's been out even lately with his injuries. But definitely, this team is somebody that we expected to do it with their offense, and they've been doing it with their pitching staff more. And then they just went out there and got Craig Kimbrell and Tapera, and then to put that with Crochet and
And Hendricks.
Kopech and Hendricks, and that bullpen is
Bummer.
just Bummer. Even I forget about Bummer. That's just a disgusting pitching staff.
Yeah, I think that this White Sox team right now, to me, looks like the most complete team in the American League. I think they're really balanced. They've got a good balance. Their pitchers are their starting pitchers are really good. Their bullpen is really good, and then I think their lineup is a good balance between guys who are just going to hit for power and guys who make a lot of contact. I think you got guys like Jose Abreu who are all around hitters, make a lot of contact. Then you got a couple guys who are going to sell out for power. You look at Luis Roberts, a guy that's going to do that. Grandal, when he's healthy, is a really an own base and power guy. He's not going to hit for high average, but you got guys like Andrew Vaughn coming along. He's been really good recently. Tim Anderson's a great all around hitter. Moncada's a guy that's going to hit for a lot of power. You've got a really good balance to me. Excuse me, of power, speed, contact, and then your pitching. And like I say, I mean, you've got lefties in the bullpen, you got righties in the bullpen, you've got a starting rotation with both lefties and righties who pitch who are really good, and you've got a big three in that rotation, and something too. You look at the postseason. As a team that it's going to be hard to beat this team in a 5 game series because you're going to get 3 starts out of Rodon and Cope and Giolito and Lynn, and then you're also going to have like a Dylan Cease who could be that fourth guy who's pitched really well for a lot of this year. So this is a team that I really am impressed, very impressed by this team right now, and I would probably consider them my favorite in the American League at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that they are a team that I very much like. Then I think they match up well against pretty much anybody, especially a team like Boston that kind of does it with their hitting more than their pitching. This is a team that they can really neutralize that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, and like I say, I think the White Sox might have the best pitching staff or pitching rotation and bullpen in the American League, and they're not far off from having the best lineup in the American League either. But
yeah,
we'll see what happens with them. They still got they got to get some of these guys back in the swing of things. Eloy looks like he's picked up right where he left off last year, but Luis Robert is a guy who they'd like to get him going. I think this is a team that definitely still has some guys they need to get going and get Grandal back. But I love what I've seen from the White Sox. But you look at a couple other teams in this division just to kind of mention them. Cleveland, they're still at 500. They've been a somewhat interesting team. The injuries have really decimated their pitching staff and underperformance compared to last year for some guys too, like a Plesac or Savali. You look at Shane Bieber, like these haven't been the same guys as last year, and obviously Bieber being hurt a lot of the years has hurt them a lot. But how about the Tigers? They're only 6 games under 500, which it's not good, but for what you expected from the Tigers, that's not terrible. So,
yeah, I think everybody expected the Tigers to be in the basement of this division, myself including.
oh yeah,
And it's very minor news, but they did re-sign Jonathan Scope to a 2-year extension as well this past week. So leaves another guy that has been pretty solid for them all around, and a decent veteran for those young guys to kind of be with. Um, but they've really impressed me. And then you look at Kansas City; they're down there; they're 18 games back. They finally, I think, are finally hitting the full reset button. Um, and I think it's going to be good for them. We'll see Bobby Witt pretty up soon. They're starting to let their young pitchers get some innings. I think they're still going to be a ways off, but I think it's finally time that they're hitting the kind of reset button for themselves.
Yeah, the Royals going forward, I was real disappointed in them at the trade deadline for not moving Whit Merrifield for what they
Yeah,
could get. He's a guy who's starting to, really show. He's got his skill set was never one that was going to age all that well, and it's starting to look like he's aging a little bit with that skill set. And even though he's still a pretty useful player, they could have gotten something for him. But for a team that they moved Jorge Soler and he's been killing it in Atlanta so far. They moved Danny Duffy. They really have sold at the deadline, trying to pick up as many pieces as they could. You look at the Twins, and I don't think anybody really expected to be talking about them at the basement of this division at this point in the season. But they've been a disaster. Everything's gone wrong for them, and they just moved Barrios. There was so much talk about them moving Buxton at the deadline, even though they didn't get it done. I kind of expect them to move him in the off season,
yeah,
uh, and then they just they moved they moved. They really just haven't been good. They've been bad. I think they're going to have to hit that reset button as well. Um, they just they had a couple good years with this current core, but it just didn't hold up well enough to get them to the next level. And they had a lot of guys who were kind of coming up through the ranks that didn't quite turn out to be what they hoped. Like Miguel Sano came up as a top 5 overall prospect, and he's been okay. He's been a legit major leaguer, but he hasn't been kind of what they expected him to be. And some guys like that. They've had some guys that underperform, like Max Kepler maybe. Um, they've lost a couple guys to free agency. Look at Eddie Rosario, they lost, and losing Trevor May, one of their top relievers, to free agency hurt them as well. This is just a team that they had a couple years where they had some guys overperform, but they are at the point where they pretty much had to move on, and I think they'll probably move a couple more guys going into the offseason. And I don't know if they'll have to do a full on rebuild because they still do have some interesting players, but a retool is a definite. Maybe another year of them not being very good before they can kind of come back and see what they can do again. But definitely a disappointing year for them. But yeah, this division is just all about the White Sox right now. So
yeah. Well, let's jump over to the American League West, where Houston is leading this division still, but Oakland's not too far back at only 2 games.
yeah, so I look at this division, and Houston has an incredible offense. A lot of their guys that struggled last year in the short season have come back to being themselves. Guys like Jose Altuve, Yuli Gurriel, although I believe he's banged up right now,
Yeah,
is having a career year. They've gotten good contributions from Michael Brantley, who's been really solid. Kyle Tucker has stepped up and played well in the outfield after losing Springer. And then their starting pitching has been pretty solid for compared to what we kind of expected coming in. Garcia and their rotation has been a very pleasant surprise for them. Their bullpen's been okay. They obviously added to their bullpen with Kendall Graveman at the deadline. I think this is a fairly weak division. I know there's 4 teams above 500 here, but I don't especially believe in all 4 of those teams as really good teams. I think you look at the A's as a team that it wins a lot of close games, doing kind of the same thing they've been doing for the last few years. They win a lot of close games, and they kind of do it off of fundamentals and pitching and playing really good defense. I mean, they lost Laureano for a while, which is a pretty big deal for them. That hurts them pretty big. He was having a great year. The Mariners, you look at as a team that has overperformed all year. They're actually finally starting to get some help from guys like Kellenick playing better, starting to figure it out a little bit at the big league level, which has been big for them. Um, and the Mariners also still have a great farm system too. They got some really good players coming up, and kind of what could have been for the Angels. I mean, if they had their pitchers perform at the same level as they did last year, and had stayed healthy on the offensive side, the Angels could have easily been the team here. But they've had injury issues all year, and some dips in performance from guys that were really good last year, so that's hurt them a lot. But and then the Rangers are kind of the same shape as the Orioles. They're just not good. So
Yeah, if you look at Houston, the one thing I did find kind of fascinating is that obviously you want to beat the teams under 500, and you want to those are the teams you should beat. They're 49-29 against those teams. So if you look at their record, that makes them 17-17 against winning teams. So they're a 500 ball club against winning teams this year. So that's a little thing that I don't know. It's hard to really break down what that means for the Astros, but I do think that it's a little interesting that when you're facing the best teams and you expect the Astros to be one of the best teams, and I know their pitching staff has really struggled, you would expect a team like that to be a little bit better in those situations. Uh, Oakland, they one thing that they do have that happened this past week is Ramon Laureano, their center fielder, got suspended 80 games for PEDs, which makes the Starling Marte trade at the deadline even bigger now. And we'll talk. Actually, not really because we didn't pick him. But Marte over the past month has led baseball in WAR. He's batted 435 over the past month, a 489 on base percentage. 18 runs, 13 RBIs, 13 stolen bases the past month. So that's a big pickup for the A's, especially losing Laureano. Uh, that will help make continue this run at Houston. Seattle, I think I always felt they were a team that wasn't going to really compete this year, but they've got some really good contributions from, like you said, um, their younger guys are starting to play better lately. Kellenick, I think Logan Gilbert's even been pretty solid. Toro, since they traded for Toro, I think he's batting over like 380 this year. Ty France has been another really under the radar guy for him this year, having a pretty good season. So with those guys developing, they're pretty dang close. And I think, like you said, they still have a great farm system that they could make some bigger trades this offseason with Jerry Dipoto, who we know likes to be active, and maybe make a push for for maybe a wild card spot next year.
yeah, I mean you got Julio Rodriguez, and that farm system still is one of the
Yeah,
top prospects in all of baseball. And
and they have a couple nice pitchers too with George
yeah, they
Kirby
do.
and Emerson Hancock.
Yeah, Noel V. Marte.
Yep, as a shortstop.
Yeah, so they got some really nice looking guys in that farm system too. So good for the Mariners. It'd be nice to see them. They haven't been in the postseason in like 15, like almost 20 years. I think
Yeah, I think it was like
it is now.
2001 or 2002
I
or
think
something.
2002 maybe was the last time. So it's been so long for them, and you hate to see a franchise struggle for that long, and it's not like they haven't tried either. I mean, they've gone out and made big splashes before. They signed Robinson Cano, was one of the biggest free agent signings in the last 20 years. And they signed him, and they just never have gotten over the hump. They've had a few really good seasons, but they just haven't quite gotten it done. And but the Mariners, I mean, 59-54, it's going to be a successful season for them, regardless of where they end up. But they're just, I don't think they can quite catch the Astros and A's here in the AL West. But moving on, let's look at this is probably the most. I think might be the worst division. Maybe not. If you look at depth wise, it's better than the AL Central and probably the NL Central. But there's no real top team here in this division. There's three teams that are really close together, and I think the winner is going to be like an 85, 86 win team most likely, and that's the NL East. And you've got the Phillies have taken control. They actually have won, I believe, 8 in a row
Yeah,
coming into tonight, and they're in rain delay tonight right now. So although they're playing their toughest stretch of the year, or their toughest games of the year, starting tonight against the Dodgers. They've won like 8 in a row, and they've taken control. The Mets have been absolutely atrocious recently. Um, they've dropped something like 5 in a row, and eight of their last 10, and they have fallen into third place as the Braves finally beat that 500 curse they had going. And that 500 curse was a struggle for them. They would get to one game below 500 and then lose two or three in a row, and then they get back and then lose two or three in a row. And after the All Star break, there were something like 16 games in a row they didn't have consecutive. They didn't have a streak. They either won one game, lose one game, one game, lose one game. It was some kind of crazy, like I think it was 16 games in a row, and then they finally broke through with a 4 game winning streak and got themselves back into contention here. So you got 3 teams within 3 games in this division, all 3 with major flaws, but all 3 with some really good upside too. So this is going to be a really interesting division coming down the stretch. Probably the most entertaining division to watch. Although I don't think any of these teams are really going to make it far in the postseason. You could see maybe one of them beating the Brewers, in an NLDS situation, but I don't think they're really World Series threats.
Well, I mean, we all expected the NL East to be a dogfight this year. I think we might have expected them to be a little bit better than what the records actually say. But we did warn earlier, right? When we were doing our division breakdowns early in the season or even preseason, that nobody in this division was going to run away with it, and it was going to be a tight division, and the records might not look like what you think they are because at least 3 to 4 of these teams we knew were going to be in contention, late in the season, barring what we didn't think the Nationals would sell everything off like they did. But we knew that the Phillies, we knew that the Braves, we knew that the Mets would all kind of beat up on each other and kind of keep the records close. I think it's closer than what we thought, with Atlanta 2 games back and then the Mets 2.5 back of the division lead. So, you get top 3 within 2.5 games. But like you said, the Mets have really struggled. DeGrom is out, and they don't quite know when he's going to come back. They did get Carlos Carrasco back, who's been pretty solid since he did. Javier Baez, he got a little banged up now, but it doesn't sound like a big issue. Lindor should be coming back soon, but it's just this team has dealt with a lot of injuries, and especially like you said, they aren't a great team. And losing a guy like DeGrom, who was basically a guaranteed win for them every single day, um, that's a big hurt to them. The Braves, a team we expected even at the division, at the not division, at the deadline, there was real talk that we thought they might even be sellers at one point. And then they bought a little bit with getting Rodriguez, and who's the other one? They got somebody else.
They got out of the trade
Soler,
deadline. They got
Duval,
Soler, Eddie Rosario,
and
who's
Duval.
on a rehab assignment, Duval, Richard Rodriguez, and Jock Peterson. Although he was a
Right.
couple weeks before the deadline. So
So they bought a little bit, kind of remade that outfield, especially after losing Ronald Acuna, and they've been 7-3 over their last 10. They've been really, making their way back up this division. And then you look at the Phillies, and although I don't think they're going to have a deep run because that bullpen is still really bad, they did buy, and you got Kyle Gibson, you got Ian Kennedy in there, and Nola's looked better as of late. He's been had a really really down season, but we were talking before the show a little bit, and his past 3 to 4 starts, he's actually started looking like the Aaron Nola we really know. Um, Zach Wheeler, who we'll talk about a little bit more later on, he's looking like a Cy Young favorite at this point. Him or Walker Buehler. Bryce Harper has had an insane month this year, or this year, an insane month that's kind of taken over. He's batted 351, a 495 on base percentage. Was second in baseball in WAR this past month. Um, he's just been absolutely looking like MVP Bryce Harper. And then JT Realmuto's even been solid. This team is, I think they've taken a step up, but I still don't trust that bullpen enough to get into a good playoff run.
yeah, and I mean, you look at all 3 of those teams, and I think that the biggest difference between the 3 right now has been the Phillies are the healthiest out of all of them. I mean, the Mets, you lose Degrom, that's you expected to get Syndergaard back at some point this year. He never came back. He's dealt with his injuries still, and you know you've got Stroman. Taiwan Walker's really overperformed some, and he's not as. I don't think he's quite as good as his performance was, and he's kind of showed that recently. Carrasco is. I don't know. I mean, he gave up 3 runs in the first inning tonight. He's just not quite what he was, at one time with Cleveland. Um, and then you've also got like Francisco Lindor who's injured, but has struggled most of the year anyways. So it's one of those situations where you've got a team that you know with the Mets, so many guys have missed time, but you don't really have a superstar there. I know they want to make you think Pete Alonso is, but he's also a guy who really struggles to make contact and is pretty bad defensively, even though he does hit home runs. I mean, the Braves have lost Ozuna, Ronald Acuna Jr., their two top hitters from last year outside of Freddie Freeman. That's just such a huge blow. They've lost pitchers all year. They've had Ian Anderson's been out. Huskar Inoa, who looked so good at the start of the year, has been out for a while. Travis d'Arnaud has been out for most of the season. He's actually coming back tomorrow, which should help them. And then the Phillies kind of been the healthiest. They've missed Bryce Harper at times, but other than Bryce Harper, they've really stayed pretty healthy for the most part. I mean, they've had guys go down with little nagging things at times, but JT Realmuto has been around all year. Reese Hoskins has been around all year. McCutcheon's been around most of the year. It's one of those things where the Phillies have been probably the healthiest team here. Um, but it's going to be a really interesting division down the chase because I think all three of these teams are pretty even. I think momentum wise and injury wise, the Mets are kind of getting close to being out of it. They really need a good stretch against tough competition. They have by far the most difficult strength of schedule remaining in this division. The Braves and Phillies strength of schedule remaining is actually pretty easy, both of them. So they could both potentially end up winning, a pretty good amount of games here down the stretch and really making it a dogfight here. But it's been an interesting year. You look at the other two teams. The Marlins have some things to be happy about, but they're not quite there yet, especially offensively. And the Nationals, I guess the silver lining for them is some of that return that they got has really been impressive so far. I mean, Josiah Gray's pitched really well for them in his couple starts, so that's been an encouraging thing for them. Juan Soto, when he's been healthy, has looked like himself recently. So you traded Trey Turner, but you got two potential really nice pieces for Trey Turner. So Josiah Gray's looked really good, and Keibert Ruiz has picked up where he left off at AAA for them. So you kind of look into the near future for them, and you've got some pieces there. Although they definitely have a lot more picking up and rebuilding to do because their farm system outside of their two guys they got in that Turner trade is not very good. So
Yeah, the Nationals are due for a full-on reset and rebuild. I think. I mean, I know Mike Rizzo said that he's not a patient type guy and he hates losing, but I don't know, with having Corbin on the books, with having Strasburg on the books, with having the impending Juan Soto extension coming up pretty soon. I just don't know how much money you're going to be able to throw at this team to make it a really competitive team with such a weak farm system still. Um, it's going to be. I think the future for the Washington Nationals for the next like 4 to 5 seasons is really bleak. But anyways, let's move over to the NL Central now. You got Milwaukee leading this division, 6 games up on Cincinnati. They've both kind of been playing just about even baseball with each other the past couple of weeks. And Cincinnati's 6 games back still.
yeah, so this is a really interesting division in my opinion. The Brewers are the leaders here, but I feel like the Reds are maybe a better team. I like the Brewers pitching staff at the top of their rotation. Three guys who are really good. And then their bullpen is solid. Outside of Hader and Devin Williams, and I mean there's a little bit of a drop off with some of those guys, but I think the Brewers are really good in their pitching, but their offense scares me. And the Reds have a really good offense. They've had great contributions from Castellanos, Jesse Winker, and then their two rookies at the top of their order tonight. I know they're not always at the top of the order, but against lefties, Tyler Stevenson and Jonathan India have both been fantastic this year. So the Reds are a team that if they can figure out their bullpen, figure out a way to sequence it, they've got some pretty good pieces back there. Lucas Sims has been a nice piece for them. They just got to get a couple guys right. I mean, Amir Garrett has shown at times that he can be good. They just got to get him right. They've got some pieces. They got to put it together in that bullpen, and they could potentially chase the Brewers down. The Reds have the easiest strength of schedule remaining, I believe, in the big leagues. the rest of the season. It may be the second easiest, but they have a very, very, very favorable schedule left to play. Um, by winning percentage, that is. And they do have the easiest. I just looked it up. So they have the easiest schedule remaining out of any team. They have a team that I think can take advantage of that. While the Brewers, I think there's going to be a time where they really struggle to score runs. They've had some guys really overperform this year. Omar Narvaez, Willie Adames, who's probably been the best trade of the year, picking him up for a couple relievers because Adames has been insanely good for them. And Christian Yelich struggling has been rough for them. I mean, Visael Garcia has been okay, but I really think that you look at a team in Milwaukee that, with the way they struggle to score runs, I think the Reds could maybe chase them down, but it's not going to be easy because of the deficit right now. And then you look at the rest of the division. The Cubs obviously sold. I'll be shocked if they really win many more games at all. The Pirates have been horrible all year. Um, there's not really too many silver linings for them, except maybe Brian Reynolds' emergence a little bit. It's been good for them, but other than that, I mean, they really haven't done much. And then, I think that the rest of this division is just the Cardinals are stuck in mediocrity. So um, they're kind of mired in it. They really don't have a. They're not horrible, but they're not really good enough. So they're gonna kind of. I think they're gonna kind of end up around 500 at the end of the season. So definitely interesting chase here. I think it's gonna be a more interesting division chase than a lot of people are kind of expecting right now.
Yeah, and mentioning going back to kind of the Reds, how you were talking about, I had watched a couple of their games this weekend um, because I had selfishly in one of my fantasy leagues, I have a couple of the Red starters, and I was trying to watch them and see how they would do. But like you said, a guy who I didn't realize the type of season he was having, and then watching those couple games, and seeing kind of the impact he was having, and that was Jonathan India. He's having a really good season. I mean, a 283 average, but a 4-on-2 or 402 on base percentage and a 460 slugging. So, you're looking at an 862 OPS, which is well above average. And then, he's has 8 steals, but he 66 runs at the top of that thing. He's even supplying a little bit of power at 13 homers. He's walking at a good clip. He's still probably striking out just a little bit too often, but that's going to happen. But he's having I mean, he was a former top prospect, but I didn't realize the type of season that Jonathan India was really having until watching those games this weekend. And I believe the one game where he really impressed me was on Joe Morgan Day. So that was on, I think, Sunday um, when they were honoring Joe Morgan. But and like you said, Stevenson as well. If he can get more of the share of that catching, because they kind of been platooning him with Barnhart really, because Barnhart's such strong defensively. But Stevenson's really got a lot better at that because of Barnhart. I think they were saying he's made a massive improvement compared to what he had shown at the end of last season to so far this year. Um, and then Votto deciding he just wanted to turn back the clock and be like a 32-year-old Joey Votto again, and not what he's been the past couple years. Has been really impressive. So, like you said, I do think the Reds are a better team than the Brewers, and outside of the top three in that rotation, I think that's kind of what's keeping the Brewers afloat right now.
Yeah, no doubt at all. Definitely an interesting division right now, and we'll see what comes of it. I think it's gonna be interesting, and the Reds aren't totally out of the wild card too. I think it's more likely that they are able to get that number 2 wild card than win the Central, but I'm not really sure about that. So I think they're currently kind of on pace for they might be on pace for being that top team that doesn't make the playoffs this year, but we'll see what they are able to do rest of the season. But we can move on now to the National League West, which is a dogfight between the Dodgers, Giants, and Padres right now. All three teams are most likely to make the playoffs, but you never know. The Padres missing if they're missing Fernando Tatis Jr. for too much, or he comes back and gets that nagging injury again or something. This is a team that could potentially fall back into that could be the team the Reds overtake.
Yeah, so As a Dodger fan, I absolutely hate this division right now because my gosh, it's so stressful all the time. I don't know how San Francisco just keeps finding a way to win. Like it's annoying. I think there was a day like they were playing Milwaukee this past weekend, and I think Milwaukee had like a 4-1 lead going into the ninth one time, and like Brandon Belt hit a 3-run homer and tied it, and then they won in extras. And then the next day they had 2 outs, 2 strikes, and the Brewers were leading by one. They hit a fly ball to like the warning track, and then Avisail Garcia like misreads the ball and drops it, and then the Giants win again. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Um, but their pitching has really started to kind of struggle some. I mean, Gossman hasn't been the same. DeSclafani, I think, went on the IL now. I mean, Logan Webb has kind of been their most consistent starter all year, and that's saying something. I mean, he's actually been really, really good um, so far. They did make the trade for Chris Bryant, and I think they only have 3 games left against the Dodgers the rest of the season. I don't know what they have against the Padres, but they're just finding some way to win. It kind of feels like one of those early 2010s kind of even year magic years for the Giants, how they're just finding a way even though nobody really thought they should be able to. And then you look at the Dodgers, who they've been battling with injuries all year. And Bellinger really struggling. He's kind of looked better as of late. I think he has like a 6-game hitting streak now. Mookie Betts has been hurt with the hip. He's back. It sounds like he's going to go back on the IL probably tomorrow. Justin Turner's now out with some groin injury that he's supposed to miss at least this week and maybe the weekend, and possibly an IL if it doesn't get better over that time. Kershaw's now on the IL and he's not coming back until September. So this team is it's a team that's really battled with injuries all year long, and I know a bunch of people have, but they've had a lot of their impact guys out. Corey Seager was even out for a big chunk of the season. Trading for Trey Turner, trading for Max Scherzer, it's kind of the spark that the team needed a little bit. They've started playing a little bit better baseball. They're playing the Phillies this weekend and the Mets, or the Phillies right now this week and the Mets this weekend. So it's a couple big series coming up for them. But the big thing with the Dodgers and even the Padres, to jump back to them, and they're 7 games back in the division, but they play each other 9 times down the stretch. So we're getting 9 Dodgers Padres games down the stretch this year, and that is going to really, if they start beating up on each other, that's going to allow the Giants to pull away even more, because I think the Giants' schedule, I know a big chunk of it, they play like Arizona and Colorado still. Um, so it's going to be, like you said, it's going to be a dogfight in this division. It does actually sound like Tatis is trying to make a return as a center fielder or somewhere in the outfield, and he's actually back to hitting on the field. I saw yesterday he had hit off a pitching machine. It wasn't live pitching, but and that he's actually been training in the outfield, and they're just thinking about leaving Cronenworth at shortstop and allowing Tatis to not have to worry about reaching down and making diving plays in the infield for that shoulder, and just allow him to hit a little bit until he can get to the off season and get the surgery.
Yeah, so I mean, on the Fernando Tatis Jr. situation, I've talked all year about how I think if he's at risk of continuing to re-injure that shoulder, I would get it done. He's a young player. They have made a long-term investment in him, and they're 7 games out of first place in this division. They're not going to win this division because I don't think they're going to pass the Dodgers. If anybody wins the division other than the Giants, it'll be the Dodgers, in my opinion. And you're going to ride your young superstars' future on a 1-game wild card game, in which you'll probably end up having to play for a 5-game series against the Dodgers anyways after that. I really think that's a poor decision. I would get the surgery, recover, and be ready for next year if I was Tatis Jr. or if I was the Padres. Obviously, if I was Tatis Jr., he wants to play. He hates being on the sideline watching his team play, and he wants to play. And I get that, and I think if I was in his shoes, I'd be the same way. But if you're the Padres, I think you've got to get him to get that surgery because you don't want to have a guy injured at his talent level and make that some kind of long-term injury. So, I think that's definitely something to look at there. But you look at the top 2 teams, and I mean the Giants. Like you say, I have no idea how they've hung on. to the division lead. I mean, I'll be very surprised if I will still be surprised if the Dodgers don't catch them. But I mean, either way, like it's pretty insane that they've been as good as they have been all year. And look at the Dodgers. I mean, it's just been a little bit of everything for them with injury wise, and um, they've
Agreed.
got a tough portion of their schedule coming up with a couple of teams that are battling for playoff spots. But I look at them as a team that I mean, I expect them to go on a run. At some point to win 6, 8 games in a row that puts them over the top here. But um,
Yeah,
you
and
know, you,
I was gonna say, and one thing with the Dodgers with you talking about, and I just know this because it's obviously my team and that, but if and most people, an average fan probably wouldn't know it, but this team has been historically bad in extra inning games. So they
oh
are
yeah,
1-12. That is like the worst record ever in Major League history in extra inning games. So if anybody's more of a proponent of getting rid of this extra innings format than me, I would like to
yeah,
talk to you. But that's one thing that I think that's kind of helped the Giants stay in this division a little bit because even if the Dodgers are 500 in that, if you add 5 more wins, then you're right there,
yeah,
half game or a game back.
yeah. It's interesting. It's a very interesting thing to look at because some of it might be sequencing, just dumb luck. Some of it might be, the Dodgers. Dave Roberts has been known to use his top relievers in high leverage situations earlier in games at times, like guys like Blake Trinan maybe. They haven't been the most. The Dodgers haven't been the most deep bullpen this year. They've had some good performances out of their bullpen, but they haven't been super deep. They've relied on a lot of really young guys out of that pen, and that might have something to do with it. Once you get past the Kenley Jansen ninth inning, 10th inning, maybe even, you end up with a lot of guys like Clevenger. You end up with Victor Gonzalez. You end up with some of these guys that maybe aren't quite as at least as seasoned as some of the veteran players. Maybe they get a little excited and struggle in those close games in the crucial situations. So I mean, it's one of those things, and I mean, anytime you go 1-12 in something as random as extra innings, it's especially with the new rules, it's one of those things that it's like there's just no it's just bad luck at a
Yeah,
certain level too. And then you look at, but I mean, you look at them and they're still, I mean, they're 4 games out. I know they're 4 games out. There's not that many games left to play, but like I say, I think the Dodgers at some point in the next month are going to go on a run where they win 6 or 8 games in a row. They're just too good not to. And, they'll probably end up winning this division. I do think the Giants hang on to the wild card. They've just got such a big lead on it right now. I would consider the Giants, I've said it all year. I think they're about a 500 to a little bit above 500 talent level that has overperformed. So if you put on there 500, they win 25 more games or so. I mean, that's putting them at 95, 96 wins. So they'll probably hang on to the wild card. It would take a collapse for them not to. I think the only team in danger of missing the playoffs here is the Padres, just because they're only a few games ahead of the Reds. And I mean, you're missing Tatis Jr. You don't know if he's gonna be back, and if he does, how effective is he gonna be? And is he gonna adjust well to play in a different position if that ends up being the outcome? So that's your star player,
well,
and
and then
you've got
even
some other good players too, but that's your star player. So
even Darvish has started to struggle a little bit. I think Musgrove maybe has too. Let me look that up for
yeah,
sure.
Musgrove has still been really
No, he's been
good,
really good.
but he's
Um,
not quite. I don't think he's quite on the pace he was on at the very beginning of the season, but he's still been really good.
Still had like a 2.5 ERA.
Yeah,
A guy that they really need to get going is Blake Snell.
yeah,
He had a fantastic start against the Diamondbacks the other day. I think he had went 7 innings, 13 strikeouts. He got something like 28 swings and misses or something, which is just like insane amount. They really need him to step up, but Darvish is another guy who has not been what Darvish was at the beginning of the season. He's really started to struggle. I mean, you look at the past month, he has a 4.94 ERA over the past month. His whip is still in a decent line with his season average, at 0.97, which is still really good. But he's just finding a way to give up runs somehow.
yeah,
And maybe that is some of the luck type stuff. But if I mean, I would imagine that Darvish is the one guy in a playoff game that you're going to run out. And say it is a Dodgers Padres game, you're going to be facing most likely I would say it might be Walker Bueller, or it's Max Scherzer. So
Yeah,
you're going to have to be on your game at that point.
yeah. So definitely interesting stuff here. You're looking at the playoff odds here for this division. The Dodgers and Giants are both over 98%, but the Padres are down to 75%. A lot of people kind of thinking of them as a virtual lock. I think they're still going to make it, but I wouldn't consider them a virtual lock anymore because you do have the Reds there. Um, so the Reds have an easy schedule remaining. The Padres actually have the most difficult streak to schedule remaining in I believe in the majors or at least in the National League. So not the
It's
most
probably
difficult
with
in
the
the majors. It
Dodgers.
is the most difficult in the National League.
Oh,
So they got a 524 winning percentage of the teams they have remaining to play. The Dodgers actually have the easiest streak to schedule remaining in this division. So you look at that, then the other two teams in the division, the Diamondbacks are probably the worst team in baseball. Look for them to get that number one pick next year. And the Rockies are, I mean, I don't even know what to think of them. At times, you think of them as just being a disaster because of the way they've been run over the past year. But record wise, 51 and 61, probably a little bit better than I would have expected from them. Maybe they've had some good performances from certain guys, so maybe not a total disaster on the field this year compared to what you expected, but they're still not good. Um, Last time I checked, they had like the most dramatic home road splits um, on wins and losses that I've ever seen.
yeah.
But I think were like 10 games above 500 at home and like 20 games under 500 on the road or
So
something.
they
So
are 38 and 21 at home. So
yeah,
they're 17 above, and you're 13 and 40 on the road.
yeah. So obviously the Rockies have some Coors Field stuff going on this year. Um, so that's been a thing. So anyways, it's been a wild season. In the NL West, so it's been entertaining to talk about. Unfortunately for me, being on the East Coast, a lot of these games are only late at night, so I might be losing some sleep here pretty soon. Once we get down, I don't know if it's quite time to lose sleep over these games yet, it being early August, but by the time about a month from now, if it's still like this, I'll be losing a little bit of sleep, which is probably not a good thing. But um, try to stay up to watch some of these games, but definitely some interesting stuff. I think this is going to be one of the more interesting pennant races we've had in the last several years. There's really hadn't been too many good pennant races the last several years. You had a couple years ago where, you had the ties for the wild card at the end of the season, and you had a few play-in game 163 situations. But I think this pennant race is going to be really good. I think you've got all three National League divisions are not really sewed up all the way, and then two of the American League divisions aren't completely sewed up, and then the wild card races are pretty crazy right now on both sides. So we'll see what happens. I'm really excited to see the end of it. And, it'll be an entertaining last couple months, but before I know we're running a little bit long here, but before we go, we do want to do our players of the week here. So Damien, for your hitter of the week, who do you have?
Yeah, so instead of
Or
doing
month? Sorry.
hitter of the week, we're going to go with players of the month because we haven't done it since the beginning of July, really. So my player of the month, I'm going to go with is Juan Soto for my hitter. Just absolutely insane this month. 356, a 510 on base percentage, which means he's getting on base 51% of the time. So over half the time he steps up to the plate, he's getting on base. You're looking at a 699 slugging percentage. A weighted runs created this month of a 211, a 1.6 WAR. I mean, we knew Juan Soto was good, but this is even over what we thought Juan Soto level type was. And he's still so young; he could probably get so much better even. So definitely, my hitter of this month is Juan Soto.
Yeah, that's a good pick, and speaking of Juan Soto, it's gonna be really interesting to see what happens with him over the next couple years because he's gonna be a really good player on a really bad team for the next 3 or 4 years. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if maybe the Nationals look at moving him at some point if he doesn't fit their timeline anymore. So I don't know if they have the money to re-sign him, but it'll be interesting to see what happens there. You don't want to end up in a Mike Trout situation where you've got a top five player, or Mike Trout obviously being the best, but Juan Soto being a top five player, future in the big leagues and being stuck on a horrible team. So we'll see what happens there. Um, but I think my hitter of the week is going to be Joey Votto, or of the month. It's going to be Joey Votto. He has been really good. A 330 average, a 413 on base, and a 784 slugging percentage. He's hit 12 home runs over the past 23 games, which is in the past 30 days. A 201 WRC plus, 1.5 wins above replacement. He's looked like Joey Votto from 3 or 4 years ago. He's been insane. And you love to see that because Joey Votto is a guy who is really fun as a player to watch. He's really he's always been such a good player, and his fall off has been so dramatic over his career, the end of his career, that it's nice to see him kind of figure it out again and start to hit the ball really well. So hopefully he's able to keep that up through the rest of the season. It'll be really entertaining if he does. So
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, it just seems like Fotto decided that he thought it was 2013 again all of a sudden instead of 2021, and just went eight. I think it was 8 straight games with a homer or 7 straight games with a homer or something. And then the streak, when it did get broken, it got broken by a ball that hit like 2 feet from the top of the wall or something. It was insane, um,
yeah.
on that streak. But who's your pitcher of the month?
So my pitcher of the month, I had a tough time deciding on who it was gonna be. There were a few really deserving guys. I thought Robbie Ray was pretty deserving. I thought Max Fried was pretty deserving. And then there's a couple other guys that I think have had really good months. But the guy I ended up going with, hey, I was just looking at the list again. How about Matt Harvey this month?
Yeah,
He has a 0.81 ERA this month, and that's pretty hard to believe. But the guy I did pick was Zach Wheeler. He has been, he's been a Cy Young candidate all year. He's had a sub 3 FIP, sub 3 xFIP, and sub 3 ERA over the past month. 9 strikeouts per nine, under 2 walks per nine. Good ground ball rate at 52%. His fastball has been one of the best in the big leagues all year. It's sat at 97, over the past month. So just kind of his typical fastball, not quite DeGrom like, but 97 is probably, it's definitely, usually top five. He's been so good, and it's a good story after all the injuries he dealt with in New York, for him to come back and pitch so well. And he's probably the front runner with DeGrom missing so much time to be the Cy Young Award winner in the National League. I mean, you could maybe make an argument for a couple other guys. Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff have to be considered up there, especially Burns. And you look at maybe Walker Bueller's been really good in the National League, but um, I mean, these guys have all they've been so good. And but Zach Wheeler, I mean, 156 innings already on the season. I think he's going to end up, eclipsing 200 innings. Uh, he's really carried the Phillies through a shutout against the Mets the other night, and on the Roy Halladay jersey retirement day for the Phillies. That was pretty cool. So Zach Wheeler is going to get my vote here for Player of the Month or Pitcher of the Month in the big leagues. So
well, you mentioned my starting pitcher already for this month, and that is going to be Walker Bueller. There might be a little bit of a Dodger bias in here, but he's also a guy who I think it's with Degrom being out. I think it's between Bueller and Zach Wheeler right now for the Cy Young. Bueller's had a fantastic season. Um, he's kind of learned how to not blow people away as much with the high fastball at 97, 98, 99. He's kind of pitched a little bit more. Um, you look at his past month, a 135 ERA, a 197 FIP. The xFIP is 341, but he had the highest WAR of anybody this month at a 1.5. You know, he's still striking people out at a good clip. I mean, over the past month, still at 10 Ks per nine, which is still really good. He does lose command at times, and has 3.24 walks per nine um, over his past 33 innings, but he's been really fantastic. I think he's leading the league. Maybe Wheeler took that over, but he has a 2.13 ERA. I think he's still leading the league in that right now. He's going to cross over the 200 innings mark for the first time in his career. He's at 147 right now, and I mean Max Scherzer coming in might take some of the maybe the votes away from him, but Bueller's been far and away the most consistent on this Dodger staff. He doesn't have as many strikeouts as Wheeler, but I think Bueller has just as good a shot as Zach Wheeler for the Cy Young. And this past month has been, I think, by far the best pitcher in baseball.
Yeah, and I think I can't argue with you, Bueller. I mean, the only real number that kind of is a little high is his walks for a guy who's a legit ace. I mean, 3.2 walks per nine is not bad, but for a guy who's a legit ace, you might want to see that come down a little bit. But striking guys out. I mean, hadn't given up a home run in the last 30 days. That's 5 starts, 33 innings pitched. He hadn't given up a home run. That's probably why his xFIP is a little bit inflated because of that 0 home run per fly ball rate. But he's also a guy that pitches up in the zone, like you say, with that fastball a lot, and gets a lot of pop ups and stuff too. So he's gonna have a low home run per fly ball rate because of the weak contact fly balls like pop ups on the infield and weekly hit fly balls on those pitches that are up and out of the zone. He's not really a ground ball pitcher, although 45% is not bad for a ground ball rate. So definitely a good month for Walker Bueller, and he's a guy who he's one of the top pitchers in baseball, and has been for the last couple years, and he's just kind of keeping it going and kind of under the radar. Not a lot of people talking about Walker Bueller. Everyone's talking about when it comes to the Dodgers rotation, talking about the acquisition of Max Scherzer, and everyone around the league's talking about Zach Wheeler because he's having this breakout type year. Everyone's talking about Woodruff and Burns from Milwaukee because both of those guys are we've been talking about them for about 2 years now.
Yeah.
Both of those guys are to the national media and to the national perspective are kind of new to that level. So definitely interesting stuff. I like what's going on. With these guys, and I think they're guys that are going to sustain this to a certain level. You got some guys on this list that have been top pitchers over the last couple months that over the last month or so that I don't know if Frankie Montas is going to sustain his pitching that he's done, and he's been really good. A guy like maybe Merrill Kelly's been so good. I don't think he's going to sustain that, but I think Walker Bueller, Zach Wheeler, the two guys from Milwaukee, I think they're sustainable at the level that they're at right now, which is very very impressive to watch. So definitely some good stuff there. I've been very impressed, and we'll see. I think those are also guys on some pretty dang good teams that are in pennant races, so they could very easily be a difference makers in coming into the end of the season. But one more thing, just before we let you go here, talk about a couple big series to watch this week. We kind of hinted to a couple of them during our breakdowns, but the Dodgers Phillies for 3 games, starting tonight. And then that's a big one with the Phillies in first place, Dodgers in second place. Braves, Reds. Phillies play the Reds this weekend. The Mets play the Dodgers this weekend, and the Rays are playing the Red Sox right now. And the Red Sox have actually blown tonight a 4-1 lead, and the Rays now lead 7-4 with 3 runs in the ninth. So that's a big game right there. The Rays about to go 5 games up in the division. Um, so definitely some interesting stuff. You look at going forward, it's going to be that time of year where some of these game series between two really good teams are going to be super important coming into the end of the season. So, it's kind of like to highlight a few of these big time series, and it's going to be some fun stuff to watch. Obviously, with fans in the stands this year, a lot of intensity in these late season games, and a lot of good crowds, and I think it's going to be a really fun finish to the season. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, so am I, and we hope that maybe we can make this series of the week type deal. Going forward through this potential the run down to the end of the season, and maybe dive a little bit deeper into those series and kind of give you guys some background behind it. But we've already went on for way too long on this episode. We wanted to keep it under an hour, and we're already pushing an hour and 14. But definitely, I mean, it's been a while since we did a breakdown, and I think it was necessary. So,
Yeah.
but thank you guys for tuning into this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.